talk a little bit about mental health and how that ties into not only you, but also student athletes. It's such an honor to be here today and to really partner with NAIA, and this is very much at the heart of what we do at Mantra. And it's especially nice to be back at hometown of Kansas City. I actually grew up here, not too far away in Overland Park, Kansas. We actually learned earlier that Brett and I were in high school at the same time, and we went to opposing high schools, so maybe our paths crossed long before today as well, so it's a small world. But I think for all of you, it's really important to understand that it's an honor to be here for you as well. I mean, this is the first Governance Academy, and all of you have a voice, and you have a seat at the table. That's pretty big. And you're going to take that back to your campuses and hopefully make some lasting impact, and also begin to carve out that career path for you. So, as Brett said, I'm a licensed clinical therapist, and I am also an adjunct professor. I teach educational psychology to freshmen, college freshmen. Yes, I know, college freshmen. People always ask where I build my patients, and you would think it's because of being a therapist, but it's actually from teaching freshmen. I think that's where we have to build the most patients. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about, and I didn't realize, do I have a clicker up here? I do, perfect. So today's objectives, we don't have a lot of time today, but what I want to focus on is all of us understanding what are the current mental health trends that are impacting student athletes. What are the barriers? So not only what are the challenges, but why are they not accessing care? What's standing in their way? And how can you all, as future leaders of your campuses and NAIA, how can you focus on solutions? What's your role in this? What do you go back with? So I want to make sure that we end today with specific things that you are going to go back and do to advocate for mental health, not only for yourselves and your teams, but also for students. So let's look at some numbers. Student athletes who report having anxiety, approximately 30% of women, 25% of men, student athletes who report having anxiety, and only 10% seek help. So 10% of all student athletes who have a diagnosed mental health condition actually seek out help. That's a really low number. What are some reasons do we think? So 10% seek help.
The stigma of seeing your therapist, seeing a counselor.
Sure.
It's they don't even know that they have.
So not recognizing that they need help. Yeah.
A lot of it is like the culture and where you come from. Like if you were taught at a young age to seek help, or you were taught to just be quiet, then you think that behavior should continue.
Right. Sweep it under the table and keep moving forward. Yeah.
Some say that it's a sign of weakness.
Yeah. Spot on.
Kind of extending of what she was saying, it could be the sport, the culture in the sport itself.
Yeah, very much so. We're going to talk about how there's definitely gaps in equity when it comes to accessing mental health care. But, even when we look at the first two numbers, these are students who report anxiety. Do we think these numbers might be higher?
I think it may be higher because one of the things that I think got missed out is they're not aware that it's a problem.
Right. And they may not feel comfortable reporting it, right? And so I think as you think about your role, I want you to, throughout this whole presentation, I want you to start to think about what can I do to cultivate an environment that promotes resilience and well-being, right? How do I make it okay to seek out help? So what do students need, right? It's important for us to understand our audience a little bit, right? And it says ask them. And I think that's been a common, thread of, conversation today, this morning, has been talk to students, connect with them, right? And so connect with your students. But we do know some things that they need, right? They need a whole student approach, right? So mental health care is important. But in order to understand their mental well-being, we need to think about the whole person, right? All of the different aspects that make up that human being. Think about yourselves. What are all the different things that make up who you are, right? So their identity as an athlete, as a peer, as a learner, as a leader, as a son or daughter or sibling. How are they doing in all of those aspects of their identity, right? Those are questions that you can ask. Those are things that you can start to observe. How are they doing in their relationships with people, right? Individualized care, no cookie cutter or one size fits all, right? We know that care needs to be individualized. So we've seen this huge trend in academics, right, where education is catered to and tailored to each student's needs. We need that in healthcare too, right? Not all students need the same type of care, and they also won't do well with the same type of provider, right? They need a provider who understands those different aspects of their identity that we just talked about. What do you think are some ways to talk to students? What could you do? How do you check in with them, but also check in with your teams? Yes?
I just shared this at lunch. Sometimes my office is a place of, ooh, I'm in trouble, or ooh,
Yeah.
this is business, this is intimidating. I'm in coach's office or I'm in their office. So we started a trend because I thought we were losing, we're getting away from the kid that may not be the aggressive kid that when they walk into practice or whatever, they'll just go in, or they're the non-starter, the kid that just isn't as aggressive. And I thought, I don't even think I said hello to that kid this week, just because we got going with practice or whatnot. So we started walk and talks.
Yeah.
And either once a month or once with me, once with another coach or another coach, so 3 times a month maybe. We just walk around campus, talk about anything. We do the questions. We don't always make statements back, but then that kid can share us to, just got a new tattoo, got something back home happened that was exciting, new job. So we started to connect a little bit more. They saw us as human beings, not just administrators.
Not just the label. Yeah, I love that. I love that. So
Something that I do, Coach Drake can attest to it. Every day we have individual workouts with our players. When they come in initially, I don't let them walk on the court without shaking my hand and saying, "What's up, coach?" And I ask them, "How are you doing?" They ask me, "How are you doing?" back. And then every day, and then I'll see them twice a day. I see them in practice again. And we're going to have the same interaction again. So every time I see them, I make sure I shake every single player's hand. That's whether varsity or varsity reserve. Even if all 45 of them are all together, I go around giving 45 handshakes. So obviously I use a lot of hand sanitizer.
those personal connections make all the difference, right? Even when I think about my students in my classroom that I teach, I make it a point to know every single person's name. It makes a difference when they know that you know when they're not there, right? I'll have a student come in and say, "Professor Gilani, sorry I missed class on Monday." I'll be like, I knew you weren't there, right? Versus, "Oh, you missed class on Monday?" Right? You email them, right? "Why weren't you here? What are you doing? Get your butt to class," right? They want to know that you notice when they're not there. And so those personal connections make all the difference.
I also created personal handshakes with everybody. I told them that they had to figure it out on their own. And then we'll practice. So only like 15 people came up with them, but about 15 out of the 30 have personal handshakes.
I don't know if I could remember all the various
Practice.
Go here.
So I'll do like an emoji check-in like once a month, and so it's just like color hearts, like a red heart's good, blue, or then like, orange could be, I'm really not okay right now. I could use someone to talk to, kind of, and like once a month send it out to them. So.
That's great. One thing.
Well, I was just gonna say I do something similar. I just reach out to a lot of them. A lot of times I'll go just kind of do a check-in. most of them know that I was a former counselor, so they'll come to me. But I also have the use of coaches. If you know anybody that needs help, let me know, and they'll have me to text them. So I'll text them throughout the week. I'm going to do that walk thing because they come to the office and sit, and I'm not getting my steps in. So, yeah, just reaching out to them weekly, monthly, especially the ones that I know are probably like in the red zone.
This is so inspiring to hear that all of you are doing this, because I think what we often do in higher education is we hear somebody say they're struggling, and what do? We walk them down to the counseling center, right? We all know that, what that looks like. We walk them down to the counseling center. And often that burden is put on the counseling center and the limited staff to take care of all of these students and their mental health challenges. And it's a lot, right? Which is why it puts you in a really unique position to be observers, right? You don't need to be clinicians, but you can be observers, and you can notice, and you can say things like, hey, you seem off today. Everything going okay? I saw that you snapped at, your buddy there. What's going on with you, right? Or I remember you went on that date. How did it go, right? Are you dealing with a breakup? Are you doing okay, right? And so being able to ask those questions, inviting those conversations to come in. Barriers to care. Somebody said this, my first point, stigma and worrying about appearing weak, right? Especially student athletes, right? They don't want anything to impact their position. I can't say I'm struggling from that breakup. I can't say I'm dealing with my parents' divorce. I don't want coach to take me out of the game, right? And so we've made significant strides, y'all. We have made a lot of improvement in reducing stigma, but we still have a long way to go, and especially for athletes, right? We hear all of these professional athletes and people who are really famous come out and talk about mental health issues, and it normalizes a little bit, but you need to make sure that penetrates to the campus level, right? We hear these things on the national news, but how do you make that local? How do you make those connections and make sure that you use that and weave it into the fabric of your communication with students, right? Athletes also have a busy schedule, right? I'm, preaching to the choir here. You guys know what that's like, juggling multiple responsibilities. So one of the barriers, as we talked about, to care, to accessing care, is just the fact that they don't have time, right? And the counseling center often on campus closes at 5, or is it open on the weekends, right? And it's not accessible for that specific student, right? We talked about individualized care. Start thinking about, what do student athletes need? They need flexibility in their mental health care, right? Long wait times to get an appointment. I talked about the burden. I used to work at a counseling center in higher education. The burden of taking care of the entire student body. It's hard with limited staff. So inevitably there are long wait lists, right? But what does that mean for you and that student athlete that you just convinced? Walk them down to the counseling center. They said, okay, I'll do it. I'm going to come Friday at 4 o'clock. And then they go and they're told that there is a 3 to 5 to 8 week wait, right? They've walked down there, so they're probably going to put their name down. But are they going to show up a month later? Is it still going to be a priority to them a month later? Right? It was so top of mind and you convinced them to get care, but a month later it may not mean as much to them, right? Difficulty connecting with a qualified provider who understands. We talked about that, no cookie cutter approach, right? We know, research shows that when you are in care, right, when you're in therapy and you have another human across from you who shares at least one aspect of your identity, you're more likely to stay in care and get better, right? So someone who can identify, with the same race, right, faith, ethnicity, language, philosophy, right, sex, whatever it is, right? But also We're talking about student athletes. And that's a whole other culture that you have to know. So seeing a provider who understands the culture of athletics and what is it like to be a student athlete, that's rare, right? Another barrier. We're talking a lot about barriers impacting students, and one of the things that I want you to take home today is that all of you are stewards of resilience and well-being, right? You are the ones who everyone is watching, right? Your students are watching you, your staff is watching you, your peers are watching you. And so you need to think about, how do you talk about mental health care, right? Or just well-being? What language do you use? And what barriers do you face, right? So even if you wanted to seek out support, are there barriers for you? Are there barriers for all of us in this room? What would that look like? It's easy to come up with barriers for others, but what are the barriers that all of us face?
Well, I mean, you're considered a leader, so it may be a little apprehensive on your behalf to show weakness, to be honest with you, to your staff, and definitely to the athletes. I think that would be one of the barriers.
What if you did? And what if we crossed out, strike through that word weakness, but you did? You did openly say, yeah, I get really stressed sometimes too, get really overwhelmed. I get anxious. Before a big game, I do get anxious.
I think that would, for me coming here this weekend, that one thing you just said right there is all worth it for me. Because you're right. I think if we as coaches, ADs, when we're probably holding the key, to be honest with you. And I think it's this. Obviously, I know it's more to it than that, but I do think it's a big chunk of it. If we put down and kind of cross off, you're not displaying any weakness by admitting that we all have shortcomings. We all struggle.
Yeah.
We get stressed out, like you said before a game.
Yeah.
Palms are sweaty, and that's okay. That's normal if you're nervous or whatever. So I think that's good.
We did something like this last year for our team development. It was based off of a football team. We did the 4 H's, and we also had our staff do it. So you talked about your history, your heroes, your heartbreak, and your hopes. And so it really just laid everything out on the table for everybody in the room. And with our staff doing it, it kind of goes back to what you guys said. It kind of humanizes us a little bit.
Humanizes you, absolutely. Don't ever forget the power that each of you have. I mean, you do have power. What you say and show is being watched, and what you do is looked at as, okay, that's what I want to get to, right? You do that with the leaders that you look up to. And there are people who are looking up to you as well. And so, again, normalizing, humanizing that piece of that struggle. You were going to add something.
As a current athlete right now, my track coach just did something like that. We had practice at like 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm thinking we're about to have a hard practice. And he just sits a chair in front of us. And he starts like crying, basically. He was like going through something. He was like, I just want to be really real with you guys. And he's like, I want every single one of us to just go through what's going on. I just want to know. And then all of us ended up crying at 6 o'clock in the morning. But it was really helpful. So I would say that helps a lot.
Yeah, you know what happens when your coach did that probably? There was a collective, okay, you said it, now I can say it too, right? Validation, relief, like, okay, this is normal. Yes.
A couple things that I've been a part of when I played football. We'd have like a beginning of the year bonfire with with the coaches and the seniors, and that'd be a way for the seniors to talk about their journeys, and the coaches would open up to the coaches.
Yeah.
And the coaches would also open up to us, and then we'd go tell the team and talk to the team and help them out. We also would do a thing was before film, every player had a journal, and you can write about whatever you want, or a coach will put a question on the board. You can answer that question and talk about whatever you wanted that day. And after your 4 years, you get your journal, and you get to take it home with you, and then you get to look at that for the next 4 years of what you did.
That's
and
neat.
Then with women's basketball this year, we had some stuff carry over. So we did a thing where, hey, you write a note, put it attached to a balloon, get it all out, let it fly away, and then we start a new day.
I love that. I hope everyone's like taking notes. These are all really great ideas.
I had some.
Yes, last one, and then in the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving on. Yeah.
I was just going to say really quick, just to piggyback off of what you were saying, just being able to be vulnerable in that aspect of whatever it is that you're dealing with stress-wise.
Yeah.
And showing that to people makes it a little bit more personal. So I'm like, okay, this person is like the top dog, or this person is the leader over our whole institution. They're dealing with stress too. Okay, well, how do they deal with their stress? This may be able to help that person out as well.
Yeah.
So you being able to be vulnerable and show that to your staff or whoever you have on your team can help them out.
So vulnerability, right, is key. I think the other barrier that is really important for us to address is that minoritized students face real barriers to accessing that quality, identity affirming mental health care, right? And so we know that students of color are less likely to seek out mental health care, right? That's just a fact, right? And so being able to remove some of those barriers by thinking about how do we improve access, right? How do we improve other options, right? Like telehealth, right? One of the campus presidents that we were on a call with recently said that just by moving where the counseling center is on campus, they were able to get more students to attend, right? They moved it to a more, a less like popular area, so students felt more comfortable going. Adding on a telehealth option so you could join from your home. Those kinds of things helped. Making sure that you had providers who represented different identities. Those kinds of things helped. So focusing on solutions, right? What's our goal here now, right? So we talked about whole student mental health, right? And thinking about the student as a whole and thinking about how are they doing in academics? How are they doing with their families, their relationships? Really getting to know the full scope in order to observe and identify distress. Multiple methods to access care, right? So that weekends, evenings, right, in person, online, all of those options are available. Students need those options if we want them to access care. Emphasis on evidence-based therapy that demonstrates good clinical outcomes. I think one of the things that is amazing, but is also something that we have to be cautious about, is that there's been so many advancements in mental health care. Everybody's talking about mental health, right, and well-being, and let's do this, let's focus on this. There's this option for care and this option for care. Always remember best practice, right? When you are advocating for services on your campus, advocate for best practice. Look at what's been researched and what's proven to be effective, right? And so evidence-based therapy, right, that's proven to be effective, right, that's based in sound research that we know works, right, for the different populations that you work with. So knowing that language, even in your role, will be important because as you talk about and advocate for this, people will be able to listen and understand. Focusing on what you can do. So 3 things: knowledge, communication, and advocacy. Okay, those are your 3 steps. What does that mean? Knowledge, recognize and respond to signs and symptoms of distress. How comfortable does everybody feel with that? Remember, not all mental health signs look the same. How many of us know someone in our lives that functions really well? It's always the kid that we never thought, we never thought it was, our star athlete, right? Or the team captain, or the one that always showed up, for team parties and was always, the one that was cheerful. It may not look like the textbook says, which is why you have to go back to that whole student approach, right? Really understanding them. Not just memorizing the decline in functioning, problem sleeping, change in eating habits, right? You can pull that stuff off of Google, but you gotta go beyond that, right? And really get to know the students because it's not always textbook definition. Be informed about campus and community resources. So be an advocate. If you really care about making sure that you create a culture of well-being, right? You're going to talk about it more. You're going to normalize it and humanize it. You're going to show up with vulnerability, but you're also going to show up with knowledge, right? Vulnerability only goes so far, right? You have to know what's available for students. And it's not just one person's responsibility, right? I don't know if you guys have case managers or what, so you don't just take everybody to the case manager and say, help this student out. Be informed, your students are coming to you. They're not going to the case manager, right? And you have a unique opportunity, to really serve student athletes and be a leader in that space and take care of that group that you know so well. Normalize help-seeking behaviors. What might that look like? Help-seeking behaviors. How might you demonstrate that to someone? Instead of telling them, how might you show what a help-seeking behavior looks like? Yeah.
Taking risks you wouldn't normally take.
Okay, say more.
The only thing that comes to mind at the moment is like the college student saying like, I'm gonna cross the street without looking because like they don't care, or
yeah, alleviating
like,
risk and mitigating risk is important. But think simpler. It doesn't have to be complex, right? As an athletic director or coach, do you take time out to eat lunch, right? Or do you scarf down your meal? Everyone's laughing. We all are guilty of this, right? That's a sign of well-being. Do your students see, it's not possible all the time, but when you're really stressed, do you show students that, hey, take 30 minutes out, go eat a meal in silence, or watch a video that you like, or talk with friends, right?
Something that we did as a basketball staff recently, like we're all pretty stressed out at the end of the season, and we have a kid who has an emotional support dog. And she was like walking around campus with it, and we were on our way for lunch, and we literally just stopped and played with it. And like 5 of our girls just stopped, and we all connected through her emotional support animal.
Right.
And kind of encourage other girls, if you need that, like that's okay.
Yeah.
So.
Remember, resilience is something that's built over time, right? So micro steps, right? You're not gonna try 10 new things this week, right? But what's a micro step that you can take, right? A micro step could be at least 2 times a week, I'm gonna eat lunch like outside and get some vitamin D, get some sun, right? Or I'm going to go do a walk and talk with some of my colleagues, right? Or I'm gonna make sure I have time for X, Y, and Z, right? Once a week, right? Like pick your timeline, whatever works for you, whether it's once a week, twice a week. So if you're doing nothing right now, start small, right? But also help-seeking behaviors look like being able to show that it's okay to say, hey, I'm gonna go talk to someone about this because I actually don't know how to resolve this on my own, right? Too often student athletes feel the pressure and the burden that they have to figure it out. They can't ask questions, right? So being able to show that it's okay to not know everything and it's okay to ask for that help. How are we doing on time? Are we okay?
We're a little over.
Okay, almost. Thank you. Fostering an environment that actively promotes well-being and resilience, right? So think about these micro steps leading into an entire culture shift, right? It starts with a couple micro steps and then builds from that. Don't forget to refuel for yourself, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. And I'm gonna actually say that to everybody, even our folks that are on the side right there, right? Like we know, and I know this for myself as well, is we have to make sure that we model that behavior so others follow that. Well, you guys, I'm gonna be around the rest of the day and all weekend, and so if you're interested in talking more about this, please come by and see me. I would love for you guys to actually make an action steps. If you wanna write this down, to work towards creating an environment that promotes mental well-being for my students, my team, and myself, this is what I'm gonna do. Write it down, because we learned this in our earlier session. Writing it down means you're accountable for it. So you're not gonna just say you're gonna write it down, and then when you go home, you're gonna read that and say, okay, I'm gonna start on this. Okay, thank you, and please come by and see me if I can help with anything.